Hello and welcome to the Society of Women Engineers Archives. Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence right now, and so I'm going to talk about it too. There's been a tug of war between futurists and detractors about the promises and the perils of artificial intelligence, and it's been going on for decades. We can even see that conversation happening at SWE's conferences and in the Society's publications. Way back in 1957, SWE member and industrial engineer Dr. Lillian Gilbreth gave a keynote speech at the SWE National Convention. Now, she didn't talk about artificial intelligence because it barely existed as we think about it today. But she did talk about automation in the workplace. She was generally in favor of it, but she did urge SWE members to develop technologies that transformed jobs rather than just eliminating them. And we have the audio recording of her speech in the archives.
We can take drudgery away from the world, and we can hand it over to machines who really can go on 7 days a week indefinitely with proper maintenance and care, taking over things which, for people, have really no creative activity.
Around the same time that Dr. Gilbreth was talking about automation, the field of artificial intelligence research was just starting to take shape. Fast forward to 1972, and we see the first reference to AI in SWE's publications in a job ad printed in the January 1972 issue of the SWE newsletter. It read, quote, "Jet Propulsion Laboratory is making a serious effort to recruit women into positions presently open." And it listed artificial intelligence among the areas that the laboratory was hiring for. Other job ads for positions in AI research popped up occasionally in SWE's magazine during the next decade. But it wasn't until the mid-1980s that AI job postings became common. So, how did people feel about this progression of computing technology? One interesting viewpoint comes from the keynote speaker at the 1981 SWE National Convention. The theme of the convention was Engineering, Applied Magic, a symposium on the future. And, fittingly, the keynote speaker was science fiction writer and futurist Ray Bradbury. How cool is that? Now, unfortunately, we don't have a copy of his speech in the archives, but SWE's magazine did republish in its June 1981 issue an interview that Bradbury did with a newspaper just a few months prior. And in the interview, Bradbury explained, "I call myself an idea writer. The history of ideas is what interests me." And he explained further in that interview, a science fiction story is just an attempt to solve a problem that exists in the world. Sounds like engineering to me. He further explained, quote, "And when you solve the problem, the science fiction becomes fact. And then you keep moving on up through science, that whole history of ideas, as ideas alone to start with. And then as they begin to exist in the world and change the world and compete with the world." Bradbury often wrote about how technology transformed and competed with the world. In the interview, he said that a short story he wrote called There Will Come Soft Rains reflected the essence of his writing. He wrote that story in 1950, imagining an autonomous robotic house that continues living long after the city and the people around it are destroyed in a nuclear war. And as bleak as that plotline sounds, when he talked about the story 30 years later in this interview, He described it as a, quote, lovely science fictional semi-fantasy metaphor of the sadness of the world that existed for us in 1950. Bradbury was suggesting, in hindsight, that it's a story about humanity grappling with the implications of the technology it's released into the world. In 1950, he stared into an unknown future and he envisioned the worst case scenario. But by 1980, he realized that everything would turn out to be okay. And we can hope that he was right, because his story about the horrors of autonomous computers and nuclear war takes place in August 2026. Looking forward a few years, the theme of the 1986 SWE National Convention was ensuring the future with technology. The technical sessions explored new technologies shaping the future, including artificial intelligence. Not everyone was as sanguine about the future of the computing industry, however. The keynote speaker at this SWE convention was famed computer scientist and 1964 Achievement Award recipient, Dr. Grace Murray Hopper, who was nearing her retirement as a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy's Navy Data Automation Command. In her speech, she reflected on the progress and genuine potential of the computer industry to process the large amounts of data necessary to solve humanity's problems, like creating accurate weather reports to help farmers improve crop yields to feed a growing world population. But she was concerned that with the speed and volume of data being generated, there wouldn't be time to fully interpret, analyze, and evaluate the value of that information, opening the door to misinformation. She told SWE members that, quote, we have to evaluate the value of overnight information and the value of information good for 1,000 years. She told attendees later in that convention, people need complete information to make critical decisions. Now, while she wasn't speaking specifically about artificial intelligence, her concern about misinformation seems valid 40 years later as we talk about things like generative AI hallucinations. Despite Hopper's concern about the speed and the accuracy of data, artificial intelligence nevertheless was an exciting and promising field in the 1980s. SWE's magazine focused its July-August 1988 issue on the horizons of AI research and explored how AI could be applied to business applications like aviation management and expert systems. And Tom DeZern attempted to separate the hype surrounding artificial intelligence from its potential usefulness in his article, Is Artificial Intelligence the Real Thing? Ultimately, he recalled the resistance of 19th century British textile workers to new industrial machinery, writing, quote, it is clear to those of us who work with AI every day that the Luddites still among us will have to find another cause to champion, because AI is here to stay. Although, by the time his article was published in the SWE magazine's July 1988 issue, the so-called second AI winter had already begun. Funding and research in artificial intelligence was greatly reduced in the late 1980s and the 1990s, until renewed interest and investment in the mid-2000s led to today's current rapid growth and interest in large language models, agentic AI, and all the other frontiers of artificial intelligence. Learn more about what SWE members thought 40 years ago about AI and the forward march of computing technology in my Scrapbook article, SWE Grapples with AI from its Early Years, published in the spring 2026 issue of the award-winning SWE magazine. And while you're there, you can learn how AI is being used today to help engineers in their job search. Find both articles at magazine.swe.org.